My family said they'd disown me if I married her. 3 years and everything I owned later, she told me she'd found someone richer while packing the wedding china I was still paying for. You never expect to find out your marriage is over through a credit card statement. There it was, a $347 charge at a hotel downtown, 15 minutes from our apartment, a hotel we'd never been to together. Just one night, just one charge, tucked between grocery store runs and utility bills like it was nothing special. Before we get into the part that still hurts to tell, let us know where you're watching from and hit subscribe so you don't miss more deep, raw stories like this. I stared at it for almost an hour, watched as my brain tried to construct innocent explanations, each one flimsier than the last. A surprise she was planning, a gift for a friend, a mistake, someone else's charge on our account, but I knew, some part of me had known for months that something wasn't right. The signs were there, the sudden business trips, the unexplained absences, the way she'd started guarding her phone like it contained state secrets. The new clothes, the distant look in her eyes when I talked about our future, the way her kisses had become perfunctory, mechanical, just going through the motions. It took me 3 more weeks to say anything. 3 weeks of silent agony, of lying next to her at night wondering who she'd been with that day, of kissing her goodbye in the morning knowing her lips had been elsewhere. 3 weeks of dying inside while maintaining a facade of normalcy. When I finally confronted her, we were having dinner at home. Pasta carbonara, her favorite, wine breathing on the counter, candles lit. I decided to create the perfect setting, though I couldn't have told you why. I know about the hotels, I said after we'd eaten in near silence for 10 minutes. No preamble, no build-up, just 5 words that changed everything. She set down her fork, didn't look surprised, didn't even look particularly upset, just resigned, like she'd been expecting this conversation and was almost relieved it had finally arrived. "I'm sorry," she said, 2 words that explained nothing and everything. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "His name is David. He's a portfolio manager at Kingston Capital." The specificity knocked the wind out of me, not just a name, but a title, a company. This wasn't some meaningless fling. This was someone she knew well enough to describe, to categorize, to place in the world. "4 months," she said after I asked how long. "Almost 5. 4 months, nearly half a year of lies, of coming home to me while carrying another man's touch on her skin. I did the math in my head. Our 3rd wedding anniversary had been 3 months ago. She'd been with him then, had accepted my gifts, my declarations of love, while already entangled with someone else. "He can give me the life I want, Jason. The life we used to talk about before you decided your dreams were more important than mine." The accusation stung because it contained a seed of truth. 2 years ago, I'd left a stable corporate job to start my own architectural firm. The steady paycheck had been replaced by the roller coaster of entrepreneurship, feast or famine, late nights, constant hustle. Melissa had supported the decision at first, had said she believed in my talent, my vision. But as the months stretched on and the big break I'd been waiting for remained elusive, that support had curdled into something else. Something that looked a lot like resentment. "I never promised you'd get rich marrying me," I said, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. "No, but you promised we'd build a life together. Instead, you built a struggling business that consumes all your time and energy. We haven't taken a vacation in 2 years. We're still renting the same apartment we moved into as newlyweds. My friends are buying houses, starting families, moving forward while we're stuck in place. We agreed to delay having kids until the business was more stable," I reminded her, though I could hear how feeble it sounded. "We agreed because you gave me no choice, and now I'm 32, watching my window shrink while you chase clients who can't afford you. David has a summer house in Newport. He has a retirement plan. He has stability." "I'm moving out this weekend," she said. "I've already found an apartment. David's helping with the deposit." The casual cruelty of it, not just the betrayal, but the practicality with which she'd arranged her exit, felt like a physical blow. So that's it, 3 years of marriage, thrown away for a man with a summer house. "It's not about the summer house, Jason. It's about the fact that he makes plans and follows through. It's about the fact that he wants the same things I do and is willing to work toward them in a realistic way. It's about partnership." "We were partners," I said, adding the plea in my voice. "No, we were dreamer and enabler, and I got tired of enabling." She stood up, smoothing the front of her dress, a new one I hadn't seen before. Had he bought it for her? Had she worn it for him first? "I'll come by on Saturday with some friends to get my things. I'd appreciate it if you weren't here. Make it easier for everyone." And then she was gone, purse in hand, keys jingling, the door closing behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded so final. I sat there at our dining table, candles still burning, half-eaten pasta congealing on our plates, wine turning to vinegar in my mouth. The irony wasn't lost on me, sitting there among the ruins of what we'd built together. For years earlier, I'd chosen her over my own family, defied my parents, walked away from my inheritance, cut ties with the people who raised me, all for a love I believed would last forever. My family had warned me she wasn't our kind of people, too ambitious, too materialistic, not from the right background. I dismissed their concerns as elitist, old-fashioned, defended her ferociously, painted myself as the progressive son breaking free from outdated social constraints. Now I wondered if they'd seen something I'd been too blinded by love to recognize. Not that she wasn't our kind, I still rejected that classist nonsense, but that she viewed relationships as transactions, partnerships as stepping stones. That beneath her talk of love and forever was a cold calculation I'd mistaken for practicality. I pulled out my phone, opened the contact I hadn't used in over 3 years, my father's number. My thumb hovered over it for a long moment before I put the phone away. No, I wouldn't crawl back now, validation in hand, and give them the satisfaction of saying, "I told you so." Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms. Besides, I wasn't ready to admit they might have been right about her, even if they'd been right for all the wrong reasons. The days after Melissa left passed in a blur of routine motions. I went back to work, buried myself in projects, stayed at the office until the cleaning crew arrived, then came home to an apartment that no longer felt like mine, ate whatever was easiest to prepare, slept when exhaustion overcame the thoughts racing through my head, repeated. 2 weeks in, Tom cornered me after a client meeting. "You need to talk to someone, man," he said, concern evident in his voice. "You're not okay." I brushed him off with assurances that I was fine, just focused on work, using the extra time to get ahead on projects. He didn't believe me, I wouldn't have believed me either, but he let it go. That evening, restless and unable to face another night alone in the apartment, I drove aimlessly around the city. Without conscious decision, I found myself in the wealthy neighborhood where I'd grown up, cruising past the gates of my parents' estate. Stopped across the street, engine idling, staring at the place I'd once called home. Nothing had changed: the manicured lawns, the stately facade, the discreet security cameras tracking movement at the perimeter. Inside those walls was the life I'd turned my back on, the family dinners, the business connections, the trust fund that would have ensured I never worried about money again. All sacrificed for a woman who had discarded me the moment a better financial prospect came along. A security guard approached my car, asked if I needed assistance. I shook my head, put the car in drive, and left the neighborhood that had once been mine, the home I could no longer enter. Back at the apartment, unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and did what I'd been avoiding for weeks. I looked up David Kingston online. Found his professional profile, his company biography, his carefully curated social media presence. Successful portfolio manager at a prestigious firm. Graduate of Wharton, board member for several charitable foundations, divorced, no children, homeowner in an exclusive lakeside community, sailing enthusiast. The perfect catch, the stable, established man who could give Melissa everything I couldn't. I scrolled through photos of charity galas, industry events, vacation spots, and then froze at an image posted 3 months earlier, David at a museum fundraiser, champagne flute in hand, smiling at the camera. And beside him, radiant in a black dress I recognized, was Melissa. 3 months ago, when we were still very much married, when I still believed we had a future together. There she was, on the arm of another man, at a public event where anyone might have seen them, recognized her as my wife. The caption made it worse: "Wonderful evening supporting the arts with this beautiful woman." Not hiding, not even being discreet, flaunting their relationship while I worked late nights trying to build a business that would give us the security she claimed to want. I kept scrolling, found more photos, Melissa and David at the opera, at a rooftop restaurant I could never have afforded, on what looked like a yacht, her hair whipping in the wind, her smile wider than any I'd seen in years. A parallel life fully documented, while our marriage crumbled in slow motion. The betrayal I'd felt at discovering the affair was nothing compared to the rage that filled me now. Not just at the infidelity, but at the utter disregard for discretion, for my dignity, for the vows we'd made. She hadn't just cheated, she'd replaced me, upgraded to a more lucrative model, and done it publicly, carelessly, as if I were so insignificant that my discovery of her betrayal wasn't even worth worrying about. 2 days later, I met with a lawyer my friend had recommended. Karen was sharp, direct, and surprisingly empathetic. "You have grounds to contest based on adultery," she said after I'd explained the situation. Her public appearances with this man while you were still married constitute pretty clear evidence. What would that accomplish? I asked. Depends on what you want. It could affect the financial settlement, though it sounds like she's not asking for anything material. Mostly, it would put the infidelity on the record. Some clients find that validating. Let's keep it simple, I finally said, but I want changes to the narrative, not irreconcilable differences. I want it noted that the marriage ended due to her infidelity. Karen nodded, made notes. We can propose that modification. If she refuses, we can always mention that we're prepared to introduce evidence of adultery if we need to pursue a contested divorce. As I was leaving Karen's office, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It's David Kingston. Can we meet? There are things you should know. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him the following evening. David was already at the bar when I arrived, nursing what looked like an expensive scotch at a corner table. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat across from him, declining to shake his offered hand. What do you want? I asked, having no interest in pleasantries. I saw that you found the photos online, he said, his voice carefully modulated. Melissa was upset. Upset that I discovered her public affair, or upset that I might not sign her convenient divorce papers. He had the grace to look uncomfortable, both, I suppose. Is that why we're here, so you can convince me to make this easy for her, for you? No, I'm here because I think you deserve to know the truth, the whole truth, not just Melissa's version of events. Melissa wasn't entirely honest with either of us, he continued. She told me she was legally separated when we met, that the divorce was already in process, just waiting to be finalized, that you had both moved on months ago. I laughed without humor. Well, that's creative. We were very much married, very much living together. No separation, legal or otherwise. I know that now. I only discovered she was still living with you about 6 weeks ago when I surprised her at work and offered to drive her home. She panicked, made excuses. It didn't make sense, so I pressed for answers. And she admitted she was still married. He nodded. She did, said she'd been trying to find the right time to leave, that the relationship had been over emotionally for months, that she stayed because she was concerned about your mental state if she left. He paused. She portrayed herself as trapped, as trying to let you down gently. And you believed her, I said flatly. At first, but things didn't add up. The story kept changing. First you were depressed, then you were controlling, then you were financially irresponsible. The inconsistencies made me suspicious. So you did some digging. I did. I'm not proud of it, but I started asking questions. Mutual friends, colleagues, trying to understand who she really was, what our relationship was actually built on. And what did you discover? That this wasn't the first time, that there was a pattern that she tends to trade up, to find someone who can offer more than her current partner, establish the new relationship before ending the old one, to ensure there's no gap in support. The clinical way he described it made it sound like a business strategy rather than serial infidelity. But I suppose that's exactly what it was to Melissa, a calculated approach to maximizing her return on emotional investment. So why are you still with her? I asked, genuinely curious. Now that you know she lied, that she cheated with you, what makes you think she won't do the same to you when someone better comes along? A flicker of something, doubt perhaps, or resigned acceptance, crossed his face. I don't know that she won't, but I went into this with open eyes, at least after I learned the truth. And that's enough for you, knowing she's capable of that level of deception, that calculating betrayal. We all make compromises, Jason. I'm 45, divorced once already, married to my work most of my adult life. Melissa is beautiful, intelligent, ambitious, compatible with my lifestyle. We want similar things. A transaction, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. You're going into this like a business arrangement, assets and liabilities clearly defined. He didn't deny it. Relationships at our age are usually practical to some degree. We've all got history baggage. No one's hands are clean. Why tell me all this? I asked instead. What do you get out of this conversation? He hesitated then. Melissa doesn't know I'm here. She wouldn't be happy about it if she did, but I thought you deserved to know that it wasn't your fault, that this is what she does, who she is, that there was probably nothing you could have done differently to prevent this outcome. There's one more thing you should know, he added. She told me about your family, about the inheritance you gave up for her. I stiffened, unprepared to discuss that particular wound. What about it? She spoke of it proudly like it was an achievement, a testament to how compelling she was that you would sacrifice that much for her. He looked uncomfortable again. It struck me as unusual, the way she described it. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Had Melissa seen my estrangement from my family as a triumph? Had she viewed the greatest sacrifice I'd ever made as validation of her power over me rather than evidence of my love? "For what it's worth," David said as he stood to leave, "I don't think I'm an upgrade from you, just different, offering something you couldn't or wouldn't provide, what she wants now, until she wants something else." With that sobering assessment, he left, walking out of the bar and back to the woman we'd both, in our own ways, misjudged so completely. It was the last part that haunted me most as I finally left the bar and walked home through darkening streets. The thought that what I had viewed as the ultimate proof of love, walking away from my family, my inheritance, my safety net, all for her, had been in her eyes simply a measure of her hold over me, a victory, a conquest. I'd given up everything for a woman who had seen my sacrifice not as something to honor, but as something to boast about, who had viewed the most painful decision of my life as a testament to her own worth rather than to my devotion. The realization was like a key turning in a lock, opening a door to understanding I had been avoiding. Melissa had never loved me, not the way I had loved her. She had loved what I represented, what I was willing to give up for her, what my devotion said about her value. And when that currency was spent, when I had nothing left to sacrifice, she had simply moved on to someone with fresh resources to offer. The divorce was finalized with surprising speed. Melissa accepted my amendment regarding infidelity with minimal pushback. Perhaps David had influenced that decision, or perhaps she simply wanted it over with as quickly as I did. On paper it was clean. No shared assets to divide, no children to consider, no alimony to negotiate. Just the legal dissolution of a contract that had proved more fragile than the paper it was printed on. But the emotional aftermath was anything but clean. It hit me in waves, unpredictable and overwhelming. One day I'd feel almost normal, focused on work, managing basic functions. The next, I'd find myself standing in the cereal aisle at the grocery store, paralyzed by the memory of how Melissa always insisted on the organic granola that cost twice as much as everything else. Or I'd catch a whiff of her perfume on a passing stranger and have to duck into a restroom until the nausea passed. The hardest part wasn't losing Melissa, though that pain was real and substantial. It was the dawning realization that I'd lost my family for someone who had never valued that sacrifice, who had seen it as a trophy rather than the wrenching, life-altering choice it had been for me. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Tom convinced me to attend a client appreciation event our firm was hosting. "You need to get back out there," he insisted. "Start rebuilding. You can't hide in your apartment and that office forever." Halfway through the evening, I escaped to the balcony for air, loosening my tie, wondering how much longer I needed to stay to satisfy Tom's concern. That's when I saw them, Melissa and David, entering the ballroom below, her arm linked through his, both impeccably dressed, the picture of successful coupledom. My first instinct was to leave, to avoid the inevitable awkwardness. But before I could retreat, Melissa looked up, her eyes meeting mine through the glass doors separating the balcony from the main room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she whispered something to David, detached from his arm, and made her way toward me. I considered fleeing, but pride kept me rooted in place. I wouldn't run from my own event, wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me retreat. Our conversation was brief, strained, filled with careful wording and unacknowledged pain. She mentioned looking at houses in Lakewood with David, casually dropping the name of one of the city's wealthiest neighborhoods. Then, unexpectedly, "Your parents were at the symphony fundraiser last week. Your mother asked about you." The thought of my mother and Melissa discussing me, discussing the failure of my marriage, sent a surge of anger through me. I'm sure she was thrilled to have her predictions validated, to know she was right about you all along. Melissa flinched just slightly. They were right about one thing. We weren't compatible in the long run, just not for the reasons they thought. "No," I agreed, surprising myself with the calm in my voice. "They thought you were after my family's money. Turns out you were just after someone's money. When I couldn't provide what you wanted, you found someone who could." Our exchange grew more heated, more honest than I'd intended. She defended her choices, recast my decision to start my own firm as stubborn pride rather than principled ambition. Claimed she'd supported my vision but had tired of the struggle, of watching our friends progress while we remained stagnant. "I'm 32, Jason. I want children. I want them to have the kind of stability my parents couldn't give me. The kind your parents could have given you if you hadn't been so determined to reject everything they offered." There it was, the fundamental disconnect that had doomed us from the start. What I had seen as integrity, as principled independence, she had viewed as foolish pride, as needless struggle. My sacrifice had never been noble in her eyes, it had been a mistake, one she had tolerated until a better option presented itself. "Well, I hope David gives you everything you want," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "The house in Lakewood, the children, the stability, I hope it's worth the way you got it." Something like regret flickered across her face. "I am sorry for how things ended. I should have been honest sooner, should have ended our marriage before." She didn't finish the sentence. It was the last time I would speak to Melissa directly, though it wouldn't be the last time I heard about her. Our city wasn't that big, our social circles still overlapping despite my withdrawal from many gatherings. News would filter back to me, their engagement 6 months later, the lavish wedding I wasn't invited to but mutual friends attended, the lakefront house, the pregnancy announcement a year after that. Each update was a fresh cut, a reminder of how easily I had been replaced, how swiftly she had created the life she wanted with someone else. But as time passed, the pain dulled from sharp stabs to a muted ache, from active wound to tender scar. What never fully healed was the loss of my family. For the first year after the divorce, I maintained my distance, my pride still too raw, too wounded to reach out. I told myself it was better this way, cleaner, simpler, that trying to reconnect would only lead to recriminations, to "I told you so," conversations I couldn't bear to have. But as the second year of solitude approached, as I watched the business slowly grow more stable, as I moved to a new apartment untainted by memories of Melissa, the absence of my family began to feel less like a principled stand and more like a pointless extension of suffering. I'd lost my wife. Did I need to keep losing my parents too, especially when the reason for our estrangement was no longer relevant? One Sunday afternoon, working alone in the office, I found myself staring at my phone, my father's number pulled up on the screen. It had been nearly 5 years since we'd spoken. Since the day I told them I was marrying Melissa despite their objections, since they had told me I would be cut off if I went through with it. My thumb hovered over the call button, indecision paralyzing me. What would I say? How would I explain the dissolution of the marriage they had opposed from the start? I set the phone down, unable to make the call. Not yet, perhaps not ever. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. 2 weeks later, I was presenting a design to a potential new client, a boutique hotel development that could put our firm on the map if we landed it. The meeting was going well, the clients engaged, asking thoughtful questions about our approach. Then the conference room door opened, and a late arrival joined the group. My father. He looked older than I remembered, his hair more silver than black now, but otherwise unchanged, the same commanding presence, the same impeccable suit, the same shrewd eyes that had always seen through my childish deceptions. Those eyes widened slightly when they met mine. He hadn't known I would be there any more than I had known about his involvement. "Jason," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral, "I wasn't aware your firm was bidding on this project." "Mr. Hamilton," I replied, matching his formality. "Yes, we've been working on the proposal for several months." The clients looked between us, confusion evident. "You two know each other?" the lead developer asked. "Yes," my father said before I could respond. "Jason is my son." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. When it concluded, the clients filed out, leaving me alone with my father for the first time in 5 years. We stood in awkward silence, the conference room suddenly too large and too small simultaneously. "Your presentation was impressive," he said finally, "the environmental integration elements particularly." "Thank you," I managed, unsure how to navigate this unexpected moment. I didn't know Hamilton Developments was involved in this project. "Recent development, the original investor pulled out, they needed additional capital." He paused. "Your mother will be pleased to hear I ran into you. We've wondered how you were doing." The tentative olive branch hung between us, neither fully extended nor withdrawn. I thought of all the scenarios I had imagined for our eventual reunion, the recriminations, the defenses, the careful scripts I had composed in my head. None of them fit this mundane, professional encounter, this cautious circling of the central wound. "I'm doing all right," I said, then taking a risk. "The divorce was finalized last year." Something flickered across his face, sadness perhaps, or vindication carefully suppressed. "Yes, we'd heard, I'm sorry." The simple expression of sympathy, not "we told you so," or "it was inevitable," loosened something tight in my chest. "It was for the best," I said, the closest I could come to acknowledging they might have been right about Melissa. My father nodded, accepting this without pressing. Then, almost hesitantly, your mother is hosting a small dinner this Friday. Family, a few close friends, if you're not otherwise engaged. What time? I asked. 7, still the same house, a ghost of a smile, still the same door code to the gate. I nodded, unable to find the right words for this moment that was simultaneously too big and too small for everything that needed to be said. I'll bring wine. That Friday, I found myself driving up the familiar winding driveway to my parents' home, a bottle of my mother's favorite wine on the passenger seat beside me, my stomach tight with apprehension. The security gate had accepted the old code, just as my father had said it would, as if they had been keeping my place open all this time, waiting for my return. As I parked in the circular drive, the front door opened, and my mother appeared, elegant as always in a simple black dress, her hair styled in the same sophisticated updo she had favored since I was a child. She did not rush toward me or make any dramatic gesture of welcome. She simply stood there, watching as I approached, her expression a complex mixture of caution and hope. "Jason," she said when I reached the door, her voice steady despite the emotion I could see in her eyes. "You came." "I brought your favorite Bordeaux," I said, holding out the bottle like a peace offering, like a key to a door I wasn't sure would open. She took it, examined the label with a small nod of approval. "You remembered." "Some things you don't forget," I said, meaning more than just her wine preference. She met my eyes then, really looked at me, the careful facade slipping just slightly. "No, you don't." She stepped aside, gestured me in. "Come, everyone's in the library." Later, after dinner had been served and the initial awkwardness had given way to something approaching normal family interaction, my mother found me alone on the terrace, looking out at the manicured gardens illuminated by strategic lighting. "It wasn't just about her background, you know," she said without preamble, "or her lack of a trust fund or any of the snobbishness you accused us of." I turned to face her, surprised by the direct approach. The Hamiltons typically circled difficult topics for years before addressing them head-on. "Then what was it about?" I asked, not aggressive, just genuinely wanting to understand after all this time. My mother sighed, looking out at the gardens rather than at me. We saw something in her, a calculation, a focus on what could be gained rather than what could be given. She paused. "When she looked at you, she saw the Hamilton name, the connections, the future security. She didn't see you." The assessment was so close to the realization I had come to myself that it took my breath away. "Why didn't you say that, instead of talking about her unsuitable background and how she wasn't our kind? Would you have listened?" My mother's gaze was direct now, challenging. "You were 26, in love for the first time with a beautiful woman who made you feel like the center of the universe. If we had said she was using you, that her affection was conditional on what you could provide, would you have believed us?" I wanted to say yes, to claim I would have heeded their warning if it had been framed that way, but honesty compelled me to shake my head. Probably not. "No, you needed to discover it for yourself." She placed her hand on mine, the first direct contact between us since my arrival, though I wish you could have learned that lesson with less pain. The simple touch, the straightforward acknowledgement of my suffering without any hint of "I told you so," broke something in me that had been rigidly held together for too long. "I gave up everything for her," I said, my voice lower and more unsteady than I intended. "And in the end, she left me for exactly what I'd rejected. For money, security, status, all the things I could have had if I'd stayed." My mother's hand tightened on mine. "You gave up material things, Jason, connections, opportunities, financial support. Those can be rebuilt." She met my eyes directly. "You never lost us, not really. Even when we couldn't support your choice, we were still your family. That doesn't change." "I missed you," I admitted, the simple truth finally spoken aloud. "All of you. Even when I was angry, even when I thought I was right and you were wrong, I missed my family." "And we missed you," she straightened, composure returning as it always did with my mother, the brief window of emotional vulnerability closing as quickly as it had opened. "Now, I believe Catherine's youngest is eager to tell his uncle about his robotics competition. Apparently you're something of a hero to him, though I can't imagine why." As I followed my mother back inside, to where my nephew was indeed waiting with eager stories of engineering triumphs, I felt something shift and settle within me. Not healing exactly, the wounds were still too fresh, the lessons too recently learned for that, but something like the beginning of acceptance, of moving forward rather than remaining trapped in the grief of what I had lost. I had lost Melissa, yes, had lost years with my family, time that could never be reclaimed. Had lost the simple faith in love that had led me to sacrifice everything for someone who had viewed that sacrifice as a trophy rather than a gift. But I hadn't lost everything. The foundation remained family, talent, determination, a clearer understanding of both myself and others, something to build upon, to rebuild with as I moved into whatever came next. The tentative reconciliation with my family marked a new phase, not an erasing of the past, but a careful rebuilding on altered ground. Weekly dinners became monthly family events. My father, to my ongoing surprise, took a genuine interest in my architectural work, occasionally offering connections or insights that I was finally mature enough to accept without seeing them as attempts to control my path. My mother, in her precise, restrained way, helped me find a new apartment in a better neighborhood, not by offering money, which she knew I would refuse, but by using her real estate connections to find a place within my budget that might otherwise have gone to someone with a more established financial portfolio. The business, too, was finding its footing. The hotel project we presented the day of my unexpected reunion with my father became a reality, our bid accepted, construction underway, our firm's profile rising as a result. Other projects followed, each more substantial than the last, our reputation for innovative but practical design growing within the industry. I'd like to say my personal life enjoyed a similar renaissance, but that remained more complicated. Dating felt like navigating a minefield, each potential connection shadowed by the specter of Melissa, by the fear of misreading someone's intentions again, of missing the calculation behind the affection. And then came the invitation that changed everything. It arrived on heavy cream stock, the kind of formal announcement that the Hamiltons had sent and received throughout my childhood. Weddings, graduations, significant anniversaries, all marked with appropriate ceremonial documentation. David and Melissa Kingston request the honor of your presence at the christening of their daughter, Sophia Grace Kingston, Sunday, June 12th. I stared at it for a long time, trying to understand why I'd received it. Melissa and I hadn't spoken since that awkward balcony encounter 2 years earlier. We had no mutual business, no reason for continued contact. The divorce was final, the relationship cleanly severed. I called Catherine, who had maintained loose connections with some of Melissa's social circle through the intricate web of private school parents and charity committees that structured high society in our city. "It's a power play," my sister said bluntly after I'd explained the situation. "From what I hear, things aren't as perfect in Kingston Paradise as they appear on Instagram." "What do you mean?" "Rumors, nothing concrete, but there's talk that David isn't quite as wealthy as he presented himself to be. Some investments went bad, clients pulling out, and Melissa isn't handling the possibility of lifestyle downgrades with particular grace." I digested this, uncertain how it explained the invitation. So why invite me to the christening? Catherine sighed with the particular exasperation she reserved for what she considered male obtuseness. "Because you're reconnected with the family now, Jason, the Hamilton family, with the connections and resources she thought she was getting when she married you. She's keeping options open, creating links she might need if the Kingston ship starts sinking." I skipped the christening, of course, sent a polite but distant card with a modest check that acknowledged the occasion without engaging with it personally. Closed that door firmly, finally, with the clear understanding that it never needed to open again. The real turning point came 3 months later, at the grand opening of the hotel we had designed. A formal affair, all champagne and carefully curated hors d'oeuvres, the city's business elite mingling with design world luminaries beneath the soaring ceilings and dramatic lighting our firm had created. I was engaged in conversation with the hotel developer when I saw them enter, David and Melissa, she in a striking red dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, he looking slightly stressed beneath his practiced smile. My immediate instinct was to find a reason to be elsewhere, to avoid the inevitable awkward interaction. But then I caught myself, recognized the old pattern of avoidance, of giving Melissa's presence power over my choices, my comfort, my space. No more. This was my professional triumph, the physical manifestation of the vision and work that had sustained me through the worst period of my life. I would not cede 1 inch of ground, would not let her presence diminish this moment in any way. So I stayed where I was, continued my conversation, allowed myself to fully inhabit my success without qualification or retreat. When our paths eventually crossed, as they inevitably would in the carefully choreographed circulation of such events, I was ready. "Jason," she said, her smile practiced but her eyes cautious. "Congratulations, the hotel is stunning." "Thank you," I replied, my tone professionally cordial, neither cold nor warm. "I appreciate you both coming to celebrate its opening." Throughout the brief exchange, I waited for the familiar ache to surface, for the remnants of pain to make themselves known. Nothing came, just the mild discomfort of small talk with distant acquaintances, people I had once known well but whose lives no longer intersected meaningfully with mine. When they moved on to greet other guests, Tom appeared at my elbow with fresh champagne. "Well handled," he murmured. "Very smooth, very mature." Seriously, though, his voice dropped, became genuinely curious rather than teasing. "How was that, seeing them together? The woman who left you for a richer man, now at your professional event?" I considered the question, searching my emotional landscape for the answer. Honestly, it was nothing, like running into people I used to know but don't think about anymore. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "That's when you know you're really over someone, when they become just people." Just people, not the woman who had broken my heart, not the man who had replaced me, not symbols of betrayal or loss or what might have been. Just two people at a party, no more significant to my life than any other guest. Later that night, as the event wound down and the crowd thinned, I found myself alone on the hotel's rooftop terrace, the space I had redesigned during that catalytic night after seeing Melissa with her baby. The city stretched out below, lights glittering against the darkness, beautiful and alive with possibility. I thought about the path that had led me here, the love I had believed in so completely, the family I had sacrificed for it, the betrayal that had shattered my world, the slow, painful rebuilding that followed. Each piece necessary, each wound and healing part of the journey to this moment, this view, this hard-won peace. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Hotel looks magnificent in the photos. Your father won't say it, but he's impressed. Sunday dinner still on." I smiled at the characteristic blend of pride and practical planning, typed a quick confirmation. 5 years ago I had chosen Melissa over my family, had believed I was making the noble choice, the romantic choice, following my heart instead of obligation or expectation. Now I understood there had never been a true opposition between love and family. The conflict had been manufactured, partly by my parents' initial resistance, yes, but mainly by Melissa herself, who had seen more value in my severing those ties than in finding a way to bridge them, who had gloried in my sacrifice rather than mourning the pain it caused me. The rooftop door opened behind me and I turned, expecting to see Tom or one of the hotel staff. Instead, a woman I didn't recognize stepped out, then paused when she saw me. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was looking for a quiet place to make a call. I didn't realize anyone was out here." "It's fine," I assured her. "Plenty of space, and the acoustics should be good for calls. We designed it that way." "You're one of the architects." She moved closer, her interest clearly professional rather than personal. "I'm Eliza Chen, by the way. I write for Design Quarterly." "Jason Hamilton." We shook hands. "And yes, I'm with Westridge Partners. This was our project." "The atrium is extraordinary," she said, genuine appreciation in her voice. "The way you've managed to create intimacy within such a monumental space, it shouldn't work, but it does beautifully." We fell into easy conversation about the design choices, the challenges of the site, the balance between aesthetics and functionality. She was knowledgeable, insightful, asking questions that demonstrated a real understanding of architectural principles rather than just surface observations. It wasn't a lightning bolt or a dramatic moment of revelation, just a quiet recognition that perhaps, finally, I was ready for whatever came next, that the space Melissa had occupied had not just been cleared but had been repurposed, made available for new connections, new possibilities, new growth. The tour with Eliza led to coffee to discuss her article, which led to lunch a week later to review her draft, which led to dinner that had nothing to do with architecture or journalism, and everything to do with discovering we enjoyed each other's company. Cautious, gradual, built on shared interests and mutual respect rather than grand passion or dramatic gestures. I told her about Melissa early on, not in detail, not with the raw emotion that had once accompanied any mention of my ex-wife, but the basic outline, the lessons learned. She shared her own history, a long relationship that had ended not with betrayal, but with the slower, quieter realization that they wanted different futures, that love wasn't enough to bridge fundamental incompatibilities. We moved slowly, both wary of past mistakes, both conscious of how easily hearts can be broken even with the best intentions. But we moved forward nonetheless, building something that felt solid, sustainable, grounded in reality, rather than fantasy or projection. 6 months into our relationship, I took Eliza to Sunday dinner at my parents' home, not as the grand gesture it would have been with Melissa, but as the natural next step in integrating our lives. My mother was warm but reserved, my father courteous and curious about Eliza's work, my siblings welcoming in their individual ways. No dramatic pronouncements, no immediate judgments, just the normal, slightly awkward process of introducing someone new to an established family dynamic. After dinner, as Eliza helped my mother clear the table, a task she volunteered for rather than being tested with, my father drew me aside in his study. "She seems like a substantial person," he said, his highest form of praise for anyone outside the family circle. "Intelligent, self-sufficient." "She is," I agreed, waiting for the qualification, the note of caution, the subtle warning that had accompanied his initial assessment of Melissa years earlier. Instead, he poured 2 glasses of the scotch he saved for significant conversations, handed one to me. "I'm glad to see you happy again, son. You deserve that." The simple statement, delivered without condition or reservation, caught me off guard. My father had never been effusive, had always cushed approval in practical terms, had favored strategic guidance over emotional affirmation. "Thank you," I said, accepting both the scotch and the sentiment behind it. "I am happy, not in the same way I thought I was with Melissa, but in a way that feels more real, more sustainable." He nodded, understanding the distinction without needing elaboration. Sometimes we have to get lost before we can find our way. The path that seems hardest often leads to where we need to be. Later, driving Eliza back to her apartment, I found myself reflecting on the evening, on how different it felt from those early, tense dinners with Melissa, where every interaction had seemed charged with unspoken judgment, unacknowledged resistance. "Your family is nice," Eliza said, breaking into my thoughts. "Intense, but nice. Your mother grilled me pretty thoroughly about my 5-year plan, but I think I passed." I laughed, recognizing my mother's typical approach. She does that with everyone, part of the Hamilton vetting process. And did I pass? A hint of genuine curiosity beneath the light tone. "With flying colors, I'm sure." I reached for her hand across the console. "Though my father's approval of your article on urban green spaces probably sealed the deal. He's been on that particular soapbox for years." She smiled, squeezed my hand. "Good to know I have allies in the family fortress." The casual reference to my family as a fortress, accurate in its way, but said without judgment or resentment, highlighted another difference between Eliza and Melissa. Where Melissa had seen my family's cohesion as something to break, to separate me from, Eliza approached it with respectful curiosity, looking for points of connection rather than division. "I know," her voice was gentle, understanding. "That's how families should be, not walls to keep people out, but foundations to build upon." The simple insight struck me as profound, the distinction between protection that isolated and protection that supported. My family had tried, in their imperfect way, to protect me from what they saw as a harmful relationship. I had interpreted their concern as control, their caution as rejection of someone I loved. With Eliza, there was no such opposition, no demand to choose between the relationships that had shaped me and the one we were building together. No zero-sum game where her gain had to come at someone else's loss. Just the gradual, imperfect, hopeful process of creating something new while honoring what already existed. 4 years after Melissa left me for David, 3 years after my reconciliation with my family, 2 years into my relationship with Eliza, our paths crossed again in the way they inevitably would in a city of our size, with our overlapping social and professional circles. A charity gala for the Children's Hospital, the kind of event my mother had always insisted we attend as a family, where Hamilton presence was expected not just as donors but as visible supporters of community institutions. Eliza and I were at the Hamilton table, along with my parents, Catherine and her husband, Michael and his new fiancée. We just finished dinner, were preparing for the auction portion of the evening, when I spotted them across the ballroom, David and Melissa, seated at a table near the stage. Not coincidentally, I suspected, at one of the highest donor tables, prominently placed for maximum visibility. Melissa looked different, still beautiful, still immaculately presented, but there was something strained in her posture, in the too bright smile she directed at her table mates. David, beside her, seemed distracted, checking his phone beneath the table when he thought no one was watching. "Isn't that your ex?" Eliza asked quietly, following my gaze. I'd pointed Melissa out to her once, months earlier, when we'd spotted her at a restaurant but hadn't approached. "Yes," I confirmed, with her husband, David. Eliza studied them briefly, then turned her attention back to the program in her hand. "They don't look particularly happy." It wasn't said with satisfaction or judgment, just as a neutral observation. And she was right, they didn't look happy. They looked like people playing roles they had committed to but no longer fully believed in. Catherine, never one to miss an opportunity for family intelligence gathering, leaned across the table before the auction began. "Heard the Kingstons are having financial troubles," she murmured. David's firm lost some major clients. They've put the lakefront house on the market. When the auctioneer announced a week at a private villa in Tuscany, I was surprised to see David's paddle raise immediately, opening with a substantial bid. Melissa beside him looked equally surprised, then pleased, squeezing his arm with what appeared to be genuine affection. The bidding escalated quickly, the villa clearly a desirable prize. David stayed in, his expression growing more determined with each increase. When the bidding reached nearly double the estimated value, most participants dropped out, leaving only David and another patron at a distant table. "Going once, going twice, sold to Mr. Kingston," the auctioneer announced triumphantly. Applause rippled through the room. Melissa beamed, accepting congratulations from their table mates. "Interesting choice for someone supposedly in financial trouble," Eliza observed quietly. "Maybe the rumors are exaggerated," I suggested. Catherine, overhearing, shook her head slightly. "Or maybe appearances matter more than fiscal responsibility. Some people will go to extraordinary lengths to maintain the illusion of success." After the auction concluded, as guests mingled before the dancing portion of the evening, our paths inevitably crossed. Melissa spotted me first, hesitated visibly, then approached with David reluctantly in tow. Our exchange was brief, polite, filled with the kind of small talk that reveals nothing while maintaining social appearances. Melissa spoke enthusiastically about their villa win, listing amenities and exclusivity markers with practiced enthusiasm. David checked his watch, suggested they circulate, his hand at her elbow steering gently but firmly. As they walked away, I heard her whisper to him, "The Prescotts are over by the bar. We should say hello, their daughter is on the hospital board." Always networking, always positioning, always aware of the next advantageous connection. The Melissa I had known and loved, or thought I had loved, hadn't changed, just adapted her strategies to new circumstances. "Well, that was interesting," Eliza said as we made our way back to the Hamilton table. "She's exactly as you described her." "How's that?" "Completely focused on appearances, on being seen with the right people, having the right things, creating the right impression." She shook her head slightly. "Exhausting way to live, always performing rather than experiencing." The simple observation crystallized something I had never quite articulated about my relationship with Melissa, about why it had ultimately been doomed regardless of financial considerations. We had never truly been partners in the sense that mattered, had never shared a vision beyond the external markers of success, had never built on the same foundation of values and priorities. I looked at Eliza, brilliant, genuine, engaged with the world on her own terms, and felt a surge of gratitude for the journey that had led me to her, complicated and painful though it had been. 6 months later, Catherine called with an update that she clearly couldn't wait to deliver. "The Kingstons are divorcing," she announced without preamble. "Official announcement coming soon, but it's already making the rounds." "Financial issues?" I asked, remembering the rumors of trouble, the conspicuous villa purchase. "Partially," Catherine confirmed, "but apparently David had an affair with his assistant. Classic midlife crisis scenario. Melissa found the texts, confronted him, the usual drama ensued." I made a non-committal sound, unwilling to engage with the irony of Melissa being betrayed as she had once betrayed me. There was no satisfaction in it, no sense of vindication or justice served, just the sad, predictable unraveling of a relationship built on unstable ground. "I hope she lands on her feet," I said simply, "for Sophia's sake if nothing else." Catherine made a sound of mild exasperation. "Always the nice one, Jace. This is why we have to protect you from people like her. Your capacity for forgiveness exceeds your instinct for self-preservation." "I'm not forgiving her," I clarified. "I just don't wish her ill. There's a difference." But 2 weeks later, the past intruded in an unexpected way. I was working late at the office, finalizing drawings for a new civic center project, when the receptionist called to say I had a visitor. Before I could ask who it was, Melissa appeared in my office doorway, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen her, designer clothes still, but worn without her usual precision, hair less perfectly styled, makeup showing the traces of earlier tears. "I'm sorry to come without calling," she said, hovering at the threshold. "I didn't think you'd agree to see me." I stood, gesturing to a chair, professional courtesy, overriding the surprise and wariness her appearance triggered. "What can I do for you, Melissa?" She sat, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. "I suppose you've heard about David and me." "Yes," I acknowledged, remaining standing, maintaining the subtle distance of my position behind the desk. "I'm sorry things didn't work out." A harsh laugh escaped her. That's generous of you, considering how things ended between us. I need your help, Jason, she finally said, the words clearly difficult for her. Professionally, I'm looking for a job, and I heard your firm is expanding its client relations department. Of all the requests I might have anticipated, this was perhaps the least expected. You want to work for Westridge Partners. She nodded, a flash of the old determination surfacing through her distress. I have a degree in communications. I've been managing David's social engagements, client entertainment, networking events for years. I have the skills, the connections. I need a job with actual income, not just social cash, and I need it soon. Why my firm? I asked, genuinely curious. There must be other options that wouldn't involve working with your ex-husband. She met my eyes directly for the first time since entering the office. Because despite everything, I know you're fair. You won't reject me just out of spite or lingering resentment. You'll evaluate whether I can actually do the job. A pause, then with visible effort. And because I trust you, after what David did, I need to work somewhere I'm not looking over my shoulder constantly, wondering about agendas and motivations. The irony of Melissa seeking trustworthiness and straightforward dealing from me, after the calculating way she had ended our marriage, might have been amusing in a different context. But there was nothing amusing about the genuine distress in her expression, the painful honesty of her request. We do have an opening in client relations, I acknowledged, but I'm not the sole decision maker. Tom handles most of the hearing for that department. I know I'm scheduled to interview with him tomorrow. She twisted her hands in her lap. I just wanted to speak with you first, to make sure my application wouldn't be automatically dismissed because of our history. I considered my options carefully. The professional thing would be to recuse myself from the hearing decision entirely, given our past relationship. The personally satisfying thing might be to ensure she didn't get the position, a petty revenge for the way she had discarded me when a better prospect appeared. Instead, I found myself saying, if Tom thinks you're the best candidate for the position, I won't object, but I won't advocate for you either. This has to be a purely professional decision, based on qualifications and fit with the team. Relief washed over her features. That's all I'm asking, a fair chance, nothing more. She stood to leave, hesitated at the door. For what it's worth, Jason, I am sorry, for how I ended things, for how I hurt you. I was. She struggled to find the words, finally settling on, I wasn't my best self in how I handled it. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the calculation, the betrayal, the casual cruelty of how she had replaced me. But it was perhaps as close to genuine remorse as Melissa was capable of expressing, an admission of imperfection, of falling short of her own standards, if not necessarily of empathy for the pain she had caused. Thank you for saying that, I said, meaning it despite the inadequacy of her apology. Good luck with the interview tomorrow. As it happened, Melissa did get the job, not because of our history or in spite of it, but because she genuinely was qualified, was willing to accept the salary offered, considerably less than she was accustomed to, but fair for the position, and because the other candidates lacked her connections in the precise social circles where our firm needed to expand its presence. I worried initially about how Eliza would react to my ex-wife joining my company, but her response, when I told her that evening, was characteristic in its straightforwardness. Does she report directly to you? She asked, the practical question cutting to the heart of potential complications. No, she'll report to Tom, different department entirely. We might cross paths at company events, big client meetings, but day-to-day, minimal interaction. Eliza nodded, considering this. And you're comfortable with the arrangement, no lingering feelings, no concerns about awkwardness or drama. Surprisingly, no, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was true. It was strange seeing her today, but not in the way I would have expected. She just seemed like a person with problems, not someone who still has any emotional hold over me. Then I don't see an issue, Eliza shrugged, returning to the article she was editing. People have complicated histories. Adults figure out how to work together anyway. If it becomes a problem, you'll address it then. Melissa started at the firm the following month. True to my expectations, our professional interactions were minimal and purely business-focused. She was good at her job, brought in several new clients within her first quarter, maintained appropriate boundaries with colleagues and with me specifically. 6 months into this unexpected new chapter, Melissa stopped by my office late one evening as I was preparing to leave. Do you have a minute? She asked, professional but with an undertone of personal request that was unusual in our carefully maintained workplace dynamic. I nodded, gestured for her to come in. I wanted to let you know I've accepted a position with Meridian Partners, she said without preamble. I start next month. Meridian was a competitor of sorts, though they focused more on commercial developments while we specialized in institutional and civic projects. Not direct competition, but adjacent enough that her move was noteworthy. A step up from your current role, I asked, genuinely curious rather than concerned. Yes, Director of Client Experience, more responsibility, better salary. She hesitated. I wanted to tell you personally, to thank you for the opportunity here when I needed it most, for not letting our past influence a professional decision that helped me get back on my feet. The gratitude seemed genuine, offered without calculation or hidden agenda. Just acknowledgement of assistance given at a critical juncture, of a kindness extended without expectation of return. You earned the position on your merits, I said, which was true, and you've been an asset to the firm. Tom will be sorry to lose you. She smiled slightly, recognizing the diplomatic phrasing that excluded my personal response to her departure. Still, I appreciate it. The chance to rebuild, to prove myself in a different context. It meant more than you know. One more thing, she said, her expression shifting to something more hesitant. I heard from Catherine at the Phillips fundraiser last week that you and Eliza are engaged. I wanted to say congratulations. She seems grounded, substantive, the kind of partner who will build with you rather than, well, the opposite of what I was. The unexpected personal comment, the surprising self-awareness it revealed, caught me off guard. Thank you, I managed. We're planning a small ceremony next spring. You'll be happy together, she said, not a question but a statement, an assessment based on what she had observed of our relationship during company events where Eliza had accompanied me. You have what matters, the same vision, the same values. I see how you look at each other. Before I could respond to this unusual insight, she straightened, professional demeanor returning. Anyway, I've already given Tom my notice. I'll send an official email to the team tomorrow. Thank you again, Jason, for everything. She left then, the conversation concluded as efficiently as it had begun. No loose ends, no lingering emotions, just the clean closure of a chapter that had served its purpose and was now complete. 5 years to the day after Melissa left me for David, Eliza and I were married in the garden of my parents' home. A small ceremony, just family and close friends, no grand gestures or excessive displays, just the quiet celebration of a commitment already demonstrated through years of building a life together. My father, in a moment of unexpected sentimentality, offered a toast that acknowledged the journey without dwelling on its painful parts. To finding your way home, he said simply, raising his glass, even when the path takes unexpected turns. Home, not just the physical return to family connection, to the place I had grown up, but the metaphorical arriving at where I belonged, with a partner who saw me clearly and loved what she saw, with work that fulfilled my creative drive while providing the stability I had once foolishly rejected, with family relationships restored and deepened through shared weathering of difficult times. The business continued to thrive, our reputation growing beyond regional recognition to national attention. Eliza's career flourished as well, her architectural journalism evolving into a book deal, speaking engagements, a respected voice in conversations about urban development and sustainable design. 2 years after our wedding, our daughter Claire was born, named for my grandmother, a tiny perfect being who arrived with her own distinct personality and immediately became the center of our shared universe. Watching Eliza with her, patient, attentive, genuinely present rather than performing motherhood for external validation, I felt a gratitude so profound it occasionally overwhelmed me. News of Melissa filtered through occasional professional encounters, mutual acquaintances, the inevitable intersection of lives in a city where certain social and business circles constantly overlap. She had remarried a tech entrepreneur with new money rather than old, ambitious, and driven like she was, their combined hunger for success apparently sufficient common ground to build upon. She had primary custody of Sophia, now in elementary school, while David had relocated to Chicago following a career opportunity after their divorce. I saw them occasionally at school functions after Claire started kindergarten. Sophia was 2 years ahead, attended the same private academy that the Hamiltons had patronized for generations, that Eliza and I had chosen for its progressive curriculum rather than its social cachet. Brief, cordial interactions in the hallways during parent-teacher conferences, at holiday performances, the usual moments when children's lives create temporary communities among adults who might otherwise never cross paths. Melissa seemed not happy exactly, but satisfied, engaged in the constant striving that had always characterized her approach to life, now with a partner who shared that orientation rather than resisting it as I had. Her new husband's success fed her need for status and security, her social connections and instinct for advantageous positioning furthered his professional ambitions. A pragmatic alliance that appeared to function precisely because both participants understood and accepted its transactional nature. One autumn afternoon, as I waited for Claire outside her ballet class, Melissa appeared beside me, Sophia's dance bag slung over her shoulder. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, comments about the recital preparations, the commitment these activities required, the universal challenges of balancing children's schedules with professional demands. Then, surprising me with her directness, she asked, "Are you happy, Jason? Truly happy, I mean. Not just content or successful, but deeply satisfied with your life?" The unexpected personal question, asked without agenda or apparent ulterior motive, deserved an honest answer. I thought about it for a moment, about what constituted true happiness versus the superficial markers often mistaken for it. "Yes," I said finally, "not every moment, of course, not without complications or challenges, but fundamentally, essentially happy, at peace with where I am, who I'm with, what we're building together." She nodded, absorbing this, looking out at the park across from the dance studio rather than at me. "I thought so. I can see it when you're with Eliza, with Claire. You have what I'm not sure I ever could have given you, even if I'd tried, even if I'd stayed." "Different paths," I said, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with her assessment. "Different visions of what makes a life worth living." "Yes," a faint smile. "I always wanted certainty, security, a foundation that couldn't be shaken. I thought that meant financial stability, social position, the external markers of success." She glanced at me. "I'm not sure I was entirely wrong, but I think I missed something important along the way." "What's that?" She considered the question carefully. "That security isn't just about resources or status. It's also about knowing who you are, what matters to you, having relationships based on more than what each person can provide, having somewhere to stand when everything else falls apart." I still have the letter my father wrote when I told him I was choosing Melissa over the family. Harsh words on handmade stationery, formal disownment in flowing script. I keep it in my desk drawer at home, not as a reminder of pain or division, but as evidence of how far we've all come since then. Last week he helped Claire build a treehouse in our backyard. Spent hours in the summer heat, teaching her about levels and measurements, about the importance of a solid foundation, about creating something that would last. My father, the businessman who had once dismissed my architectural ambitions as impractical dreaming, patiently explaining structural principles to my 7-year-old daughter. Things change, people change. Relationships transform in ways we can't predict when we're in the midst of conflict or crisis. Melissa texted yesterday about a school fundraiser she's chairing, asking if our firm would consider donating an architectural consultation as an auction item. A perfectly professional request, no different from dozens of similar solicitations we receive each year. I approved it without hesitation, without emotional calculation, without any resurrections of past grievances or wounds. Just one parent supporting a school event that benefits all our children, one professional extending a courtesy to another. The history between us neither forgotten nor particularly relevant to the current interaction. This is what healing looks like, I think. Not the absence of the past, but its integration into a present where it no longer dictates choices or triggers reactions. Where former spouses can coexist at school functions without discomfort, where estranged family members can find their way back to meaningful connection, where painful experiences become valuable teachers rather than defining traumas. I chose Melissa over my own blood. She left me for someone with money. Both statements are true, both part of my story, but neither defines me now, neither determines what comes next. What defines me is what I've built since then, the family I've reconnected with and the family I've created, the work that expresses my vision and values, the relationships grounded in mutual respect and genuine care rather than calculation or appearance. The choices I make now, with clearer vision and greater wisdom, informed by past mistakes but not constrained by them. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I had listened to my parents' concerns about Melissa, if I had not made that first catastrophic choice that set everything else in motion. Would I have been spared the pain of betrayal? Would I have found my way to Eliza, to Claire, to the life I now recognize as authentically mine? There's no way to know, of course, no parallel universe to examine where different choices led to different outcomes. Only this reality, this path with all its unexpected turns and bitter lessons and eventual arrivals at moments of grace and understanding. The question itself matters less than the recognition that I no longer wish things had happened differently, that I can acknowledge the necessity of even the most painful chapters in bringing me to where I am now. that I can be grateful in some strange way for having chosen so wrongly, for having lost so completely, because it ultimately led me to choose more wisely, to find what I might otherwise have missed. The rain is starting outside my office window, not unlike the rain that fell the night Melissa told me about David, about her plans to leave. The night everything I thought I had built collapsed like a house with a fatally flawed foundation. But this rain falls on different ground now, on a life constructed with greater care, on relationships tested by time and challenge, on understanding earned through loss and recovery. I chose her over my own blood. She left me for someone with money. And in the space between those two sentences, in the collapse and rebuilding, the severing and reconnection, the loss and discovery, I found my way home. Not the home I thought I wanted, not the life I had planned or expected, but the one I needed, the one that, despite everything, or perhaps because of it, has become exactly where I belong. And for that, strange as it seems, I am grateful.